Welcome to this tutorial showing you how to create a piece of artwork in response to the artist Nancy Nicholson. And you'll see in Photopea I have already opened up a new project by going to File, New and choosing Print A4 and then making sure the measurements were flipped so it became landscape before pressing Create, and that opened up this project for me. Okay. First thing I'm going to use is the pen tool, and I'm going to make sure I have the fill of colour, any colour for the moment. I'm going to choose orange and no stroke, and I'm going to draw what I want the overall shape of my bird to be. Okay. You might have a specific bird type in mind, like a hen or a pigeon or a sparrow. I don't per se. I'm just drawing a kind of generic shape of a bird. I'm cutting back up to my original point, and there is my shape. And I'm just going to use the arrow tool just to rotate that so the head is a bit higher than the tail, or that bit of the tail anyway. And I'm going to right click on that layer and rasterize that shape so it was no longer a live shape. And then I'm going to grab the pen tool again, and I'm going to draw in some tail feathers. And once I'm done, I'm going to change the colour of this. I think blue will be nice for now. Okay, and you can see it just needs a little bit of repositioning to make sure it's beneath the orange layer. Then I'm going to right click on that layer and rasterize it. And I'm going to right click on it again and duplicate it. And I'm going to turn that duplicated layer pink by using the paint bucket to fill in that shape. I'm then going to grab the polygonal lasso tool just to cut the end of this shape off. So I'm going to mask off that area and press delete, and that's going to get rid of that bit so I can show the blue layer behind. Okay. Now I'm going to put a face on my bird using the ellipse shape tool and pressing shift while I drag the tool. I'm going to make a perfect circle, roughly the size of the head, but I'm just going to use the arrow tool just to reposition it, make sure it fits perfectly on the end of my main body shape there. And it's looking good, but I'm not sure about that colour. So what I'll do is I'll go back to the pen tool and choose, I think, a nice pink for my head. Okay. And then I'm going to use the custom shape tool to choose a triangle that is going to be my beak. And I'm going to draw that in. And I'm just going to bring that below the head. And I'm going to change the colour to orange. Okay. Now I'm going to select my body layer, and I'm going to use the colour picker to choose a new colour, kind of like a dirty teal colour, and then use the paint bucket just to fill that shape in. And now I want to add a kind of band of colour around the neck of my bird. So I'm going to right click on the body layer and go to duplicate layer, and I'm going to use the ellipse mask just to mask off an area on that layer, and then I'm going to press delete, and that's going to get rid of that bit in that mask. I'm just going to show you. There you go. Okay, and then I'm going to do same again. In fact, I'll leave that layer below clear so you can see what I'm doing. Again, ellipse mask tool, select an area. This time I'm going to go select inverse, so I've selected everything else, and then I press delete, and that gets rid of the rest of that shape. And I'm just going to use the colour picker to choose a red, and then use the paint bucket to fill that shape. And if I make the layer below visible again, you can see how I've now got a nice red band around the neck of my bird. Okay, next up I'm going to draw a wing in. So I'm going to use the pen tool, and I'm going to start over by the tail feathers, and I'm just going to click and drag, click and drag, click and drag, click and drag, just to create the shape. Then I'm going to grab the magic wand tool, and I'm going to click to mask off the area around the orange shape. And then I'm going to go to my body layer and duplicate it. And then I'm going to press delete. And that is going to take that layer down to just that area there. Okay. And I can then grab the colour picker, choose another colour, in this case hot pink. And then I can grab the paint bucket and just fill in that shape that's been left behind when I deleted around it. Okay. Next up, I'm going to grab the custom shape tool, and I'm going to go for this first triangle, and I'm going to draw this shape here, and this is going to be one of my legs, and I'm just going to move it into position. Okay. And then I'm going to right click on that layer and duplicate it, and then go edit, transform, flip horizontally, and that's going to give me the other leg, which is slightly higher, which is fine. Okay. And once I'm happy, I'm going to just go over and select both those layers and drag them down underneath the body. And that's my legs. Okay, now I'm going to grab all the layers. Now I've got most of my drawing done, and I'm just going to reposition it so it's in a more central position and a little bit higher because I want to put my feet on shortly. Okay, right, now that's my bird drawn. I want to start making it look like a piece of embroidery, so I'm going to double click on the layer that has the head on, and I'm going to go to bevel and emboss, and I'm going to keep that as normal, as default, but I'm going to bring that depth right up and the size and soften the same as they are, and those the same as they are. Then I'm going to go to contour, and I'm going to bring that right up, and then lastly texture. I'm going to grab this default texture here, this white one. Okay, just double check. No, the white one's good. And I'm going to bring that right up, and the same with that, quite high. And then I'm bringing these two up a little bit. Okay. And that is going to give me a texture. If I just zoom in, I can show you. Okay, there you go. So it gives you a little bit of an emboss and a bit of texture on there, just to make it a little bit more like fabric. Okay, and I'm going to right click on that layer, and I'm going to go to layer style and copy, and then I'm going to grab the other layers. So click on the top layer and then on the bottom, pressing shift, and then I'm going to go right click, layer style, paste, and that is going to put that texture and embossing on all of the layers. Okay, so that's going to make all of those layers look a little bit like fabric. All right. And now I'm going to start adding some details. So I'll start with my head. Just zoom in. And I'm going to grab the ellipse shape tool. and I'm going to draw, holding shift so I make a perfect circle. A circle there. I'm just going to bring that layer up to the top, and then I'm going to use the arrow tool just to make sure it's the right size. Same as the head. Okay. And what I want to do with that is make it so it's got no fill, and so it's got a stroke. In this case, I'm going to go with a nice dark red. And I want to make the stroke quite thick, like thread. And then I'm going to choose this dotted pattern here and rounded edges. And I've got kind of a sewn effect. I'm just going to change the ratio so it looks more like sewing. And then I'm going to go to that layer and I'm going to right click and go to layer style, and I'm going to paste that same embossing and texture onto that so it looks like properly three-dimensional sewn on thread. Okay. Right. I'm going to go back to that layer and I'm going to right click on it and duplicate layer. And then I'm going to use the arrow tool to shrink that new layer down so it looks like I have another threaded circle on the head. And then I'm going to change the colour on this one. Something more like orange. That looks nice. Okay. And now I'm going to duplicate that layer. So right click, duplicate layer. And I'm going to use the arrow tool and the shift key to shrink this down, keeping it a perfect circle. And once I've centered it, I'm going to go back to the shape tool and change the stroke color to that dark red again. And I'm going to change the color of the fill to a nice green to add a little bit more interest into the head. And then again, I'm going to right click, duplicate layer, grab the arrow tool and shrink it down a bit more to be another circle inside. Maybe make that a bit smaller. Perhaps not, maybe a bit bigger. Okay, that's looking good. And then for this one, I'm going to change the colour again of the fill. I think I might go for an orange. That's nice. Okay, and I'm going to make it a dotted pattern instead, just to change things up. Change the ratio a bit. Okay. And then one last time, duplicate the layer again. Grab the arrow tool, shrink it right down, and this is going to be the eye of my bird. Nice and central. And then pen tool and fill it with nice dark red. Okay, right, I'm just going to grab that second circle, just change it to dots, I think, and maybe bring the ratio up a bit, just to make it a little bit more interesting, so each of the circles is slightly different. Yeah, it's nice. Okay, so that's my head done. And now I want to start adding some pattern to the body of my bird. So I'm going to zoom in and I'm going to grab the pen tool and I'm going to draw a little line. And I'm going to make sure that that line has red as its stroke and no fill. And I'm going to make sure it's brought up so I can see it. There you go. Okay. And then I'm going to right click on that layer and duplicate it. And then grab it to the side with the arrow tool and just reposition it next to it at a diagonal. Then I'm going to duplicate that layer and I'm going to go edit, transform, flip horizontal to get another one for it's going on the other side. Then I'm going to grab both of those, merge them together. Then I'm going to duplicate that center one. I'm going to drag that out and bring that to the center at the top again. And then duplicate that layer. And then edit, transform, flip horizontally. So I get one last one. So I have this kind of spray of red lines. Okay, and I'm going to select all those layers and I'm going to right click and merge them together. So merge layers. All right. And I'm just going to make them a bit thinner. That's good, that'll do. Then I'm going to right click on that layer and rasterize those so they're no longer live shapes. I'm just going to slim them down a bit. Then I'm going to grab the ellipse shape tool and I'm just going to draw an oval in here. There we go. I want this oval to be pink. So I'm going to make sure it's got a pink fill and no stroke. So click the X. Okay. And I'm going to resize it so it becomes the bottom of what is kind of a teardrop feather. Okay. And this is obviously inspired by Nancy Nicholson's pieces. Okay, once you're happy with that, I'm just going to right click, select both of those layers, and then right click and layer style paste so they have the embossed effect on too. Okay, I'm just in fact going to go to those, just going to bring that down a bit just so it's a little bit more mild, as it's quite a small shape. Click OK. Okay. Then after a final bit of tweaking, I'm going to select both of those layers together, right click, merge the layers so they become one shape. Okay. And I'm going to begin using this shape now. So I want to create a row of feathers radiating from around the head. So I'm going to position that first one and then right click on the layer and duplicate it. And then just use the arrow tool just to reposition the next one, and then right click and duplicate that layer. And again, reposition. And I'm just going to grab all three of those together and I'm just going to move them up here. So I've got a feather right near the edge of the neck. Then going to go back to one of those layers, right click, duplicate layer, then reposition it. And one more time, duplicate layer and reposition it. Okay. Now I look at them all together, I do actually feel they need a little bit more definition. So I'm going to select the top layer and just double click and use the bevel and emboss with pretty much the same settings. Maybe bring that up a little bit. Click OK. And then I'm going to right click, layer style, copy, select the other shapes, layer style, paste, so they all have that. And then I'm going to select them all and right click and merge those layers together. So all those shapes are on one layer now, which I'm then going to right click and duplicate because I want to use those same feathers to create another row. And I'm going to get rid of that top feather. I don't need that. So I'm just going to grab the polygonal lasso tool and I'm going to mask round the shape I don't want and press delete. And then I'm going to just grab the remaining shapes, just reposition them so they fit nicely before right-clicking on them and duplicating them. And I'm going to do the same again. Just position the two that I want into place before grabbing the polygonal lasso select tool again and cutting these two off, pressing delete, and there we go. Just going to do a little bit of tweaking now. Maybe make these a tiny bit smaller. And one last little tweak of the bottom row before I zoom back out to show you the whole thing. And we're just going to grab that middle row of feathers, go Image Adjustments, Hue Saturation, and we're just going to use the Hue slider just to change the colours of these middle feathers. Again, just to make it more interesting. So you've got rows of feathers in different colours. That looks nice. Yeah, that's good. Okay. Right, next up, let's add some feet to our bird. So I'm going to zoom in to the bottom of the piece so that I can see what I'm doing. And I'm going to grab the pen tool and I'm going to draw a line, nice curved line. So click, then click and drag to make the curve. And I don't want any fill, and I'll go for, I think, orangey red feet. I'm going to bring the thickness of the line up a bit. And we're looking good. Okay. So I'm just going to reposition that to where I want it. And then I'm going to right click on the layer and rasterize it. And then right click again and duplicate it. And then I'm going to move that central handle up to the corner, which means that when I move it, it will move and rotate around that handle. Then I'm going to duplicate that layer again. And I'm going to do the same again with the middle handle. And again, that's going to allow me then to rotate it along that handle. Okay, I will just move it though, so it fits. Right, then I'm going to select all three of those, and I'm going to merge those layers together so I have one foot. And I'm just going to reposition that so it works. Before I go to the layer again, right click and duplicate, and then edit, transform, and flip horizontally. And so I have another foot to place on the other leg. Okay, and then I'll give that one last little tweak before right clicking on that layer and going bevel and emboss, and just making sure that all of those same settings are as they were. Maybe bring that bit up a bit. Okay, change those. You're going to need to tweak this a lot depending on each feature, just making sure it looks as much like thread as possible. Then I'm just right clicking layer style copy on one, and then right click layer style copy and paste on the other, so I have that effect on both feet now. Okay, right, now to show you how to add some detail to your lines. And so I'm going to zoom into this red band, and I want to put what looks like a threaded line along each of these edges. So I'm going to grab the pen tool, and I'm going to click on one end and then click on the other end of that line. And I'm just going to drag until I get the line perfectly along the edge of that red shape. And then I'm going to go up here, no fill, and I want my line colour to be a nice light pink. Click OK. And I want it to be quite thick and dotted like thread. Yep, and then rounded corners, and then change the ratio so it looks like the thread is closer together. You can play with that to your heart's content. Decide how many threads you want. Okay, and then I'm going to right click, layer style, paste, and that's going to put that 3D effect onto that line. Okay, bring that up to the top. There we are, nice. Okay, maybe make it a little bit thinner. There we go. Okay, more in keeping with the thread on the head. Okay, then I'm going to do the same again with the line on the other side of the band. So I'm going to grab the pen tool. There it is. Click. And then click and drag to get that line as we want it along the edge of the red band. And then no fill. And I'm going to change the stroke color to something more like a dark teal, I think. Yep, that's nice. Click OK. And then same again, messing with the ratios until you get the size of thread that you want. And then same again, right click, layer style, paste, and that makes it 3D. Okay, right, let's start putting some details into our red band. So I think I'm going to go with circles in the red band. So I'm going to grab the ellipse shape tool, and it's already got those settings from the last lines that we did. I don't want teal as my stroke color though. I'll go for this nice almost white. Okay, and I'll make it a bit bigger with the arrow tool, and then right click on the layer it's on and layer style and paste. So I've got that 3D effect, and then I'm going to right click on the layer again and duplicate it and drag the duplicate down so it's underneath the first. And then again, right click, duplicate layer, and I'm going to put that down underneath. And then when I've positioned all three, obviously I need to reposition them so they fit a little better. So I've selected all three layers and I'm just using the arrow tool just to make sure that they are nicely in place. Okay. Right. Next up, let's add some color to these. So I'm going to grab the ellipse shape and I'm going to change the settings to no stroke. And I think I'm going to fill it with this dark green. Nice. Okay, just going to position this and bring it down below the white thread. And then I'm going to layer style and paste so it's got its own texture. And then I'm going to duplicate that shape and drag it down underneath the next one. And I'm going to duplicate that too and bring that down to the last of the circles. Okay, and I'm going to grab that middle layer again, then right click on it and rasterize the layer style so that I can go image adjustments, hue saturation, and change the hue to a nice yellow color and bring up the saturation to make it nice and bright, and then click OK. And that is our next features done. And so I'm going to show you what to do next. So I'm going to grab the pen tool and I'm going to click and drag to make this curved line. And then I'm going to right click on this layer and duplicate it, and then edit, transform, flip vertical, so I can then create a kind of leaf shape. Okay, just bring those together, and then I'm going to right click and rasterize both of those. And then I'm going to select both of those layers and right click and merge those layers together so that I can now just change the shape. And I have a nice leaf shape. I'm going to grab pink and use the paint bucket to fill that in. And I'm going to right click on that layer and layer style paste, and that's going to give that 3D effect to that leaf as well. Then I'm going to put some veins on the leaf, so I'm going to grab the pen tool and just draw a line. Going to make that line a nice burgundy colour, but it's going to be just one line, one solid line, rounded edges, and make it a bit thinner as well. Okay, nice. And I'm going to rasterize that before adding some smaller lines. Okay, so pen tool again, and then rasterize after each one. And once I have those 3 lines drawn and rasterized, I'm going to select them all, right click and merge those layers together, and then right click and duplicate that layer, and then edit, transform, flip vertically, and then move it down to underneath the line. So I now have the veins on my leaf. Okay, and I'm going to select those layers and merge them together, and then right click again and layer style paste so they go 3D too, and for that one as well. Okay, good stuff. I'm then going to merge those veins with the leaf itself, so right click, rasterize layer style, otherwise it won't allow you to merge those layers together, and then right click and merge. And so I have my leaf now that I can now start creating a pattern with. So I'm going to position it and then right click, duplicate layer, grab the new layer, right click, duplicate layer, position it, right click, duplicate layer, position it, right click, duplicate layer, and then right click, duplicate layer one last time, and I've got a nice row of leaves. Okay, I'm going to select all the leaves together and just use the handles to resize those so they fit the area nicely, and just rotate it a little bit. Okay, and then I'm going to zoom out, and that is what my piece looks like thus far. And if you use the same techniques to create more patterns and add different effects to your tail and your legs and the rest of the body of your bird, you can come up with something that looks a little bit like this piece that I did earlier. Okay, and this piece is done and dusted. I hope you find this tutorial helpful.